Okay, 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 okay.
Yay!
Yay! Yeah. Oh my God.
Hi. It's so
Hi.
lovely to meet you.
Oh, it's nice to meet you too. I'm so excited. Okay,
All
so
right.
um, hello everyone. I'm so happy we're all here today. This is our second episode of In Conversation With. I'm Georgia, and this is my beautiful Jiggly Shay from Jiggle and Juice. And our guest today is the wonderfully talented and I am grateful to say one of my friends, Rudra Manani, is going to chat with us today about her practice, her process, her research, and everything within that. So Rudra, do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself and your work before we jump into some questions?
Yeah, I'll do like a little brief intro. I went to UVic, graduated with Georgia, had the pleasure of going to art school with her, which was great. And yeah, I mostly do a little bit of everything, but primarily focusing on painting and photography right now, mostly painting at the moment. Yeah, I'm kind of interested as well in just appropriation of Hinduism. That's kind of this big theme that I'm working with. Big themes of identity, voyeurism, that kind of vibe. We'll dive more into that, I'm sure. But yeah, that's pretty much me.
I actually, my first question is you obviously use different mediums, like you mentioned, photography and painting. So I was just wondering what it is that draws you to choosing different mediums and working in different ways. Why don't you just what draws you to different mediums?
I would say kind of also just being in school and just having that push to try new things was a big influencing factor of that. That's why I feel I made just tried a little bit of everything, but mostly just because I can't for my photography, I find that I'm not a hyper realistic painter in any way, but I have these ideas that I would like to convey in images that I want to see that I can't paint myself. So that's kind of obviously a big thing, but also they just, each medium just has something so different to, photography. I feel it's just a way for me to express my images that I've created in my head, and painting is kind of something that I it's a whole other process where I'm figuring out what I'm doing as I'm doing it in some ways. Yes, there's just so many different benefits to each new medium,
Yeah.
Totally. I was just wondering, by using all these different mediums, what do you kind of notice? Do they influence each other or overlap in any way, in color, composition, concept, or do you kind of feel like they're pretty separate from each other?
They definitely influence each other. In ways that I think I'm also just realizing as well. I thought for the longest time they were just kind of separate, oh, this is my photography, this is my painting. But I think since I've started my new, kind of somewhat recent new series, Vibrant Chaos, which is photos or paintings based off of photos that I took when I was in India last December. That's kind of been a good combination, or it's kind of just created this weird in-between space of me having this relationship with both of them. That, and especially just because I find Vibrant Chaos is something that helps me explore my own identity in a way, because I'm working from memory oftentimes, kind of using my own body to be creating these large scale paintings, obviously. And then in my photography, I'm definitely have started to use myself more in my work. So I wouldn't say they're self-portraits, but maybe they are, I don't know. So yeah, they definitely it is just an idea of me using myself in both mediums. Yeah, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, totally. They kind of run a parallel with one another, and but then explore things in different ways and allow you to kind of I guess like understand and like navigate what it is you're trying to say. Because obviously like every medium is different, and like they have their benefits, and like the reasons why people choose them are just really interesting, because it could speak to someone for like a completely different reason, or like have it serve a different purpose, you know. So that's just like just really interesting.
Yeah.
I was also wondering, well, Georgia talks a lot about like having an aha moment. Like I love when you say that, Georgia, like when artists have that moment in their practice when they're kind of like, oh my God, this is it. This is like the pinnacle thing that I'm gonna do and that separates me from like the rest. So was there something that like happened or like clicked for you in your art school progress, or like in your career at all, like that you would describe as your aha moment?
Yeah, for sure. I would say there's like been like two moments that kind of stand out in my head immediately. The first moment was in third year. And I think third year is kind of like, maybe Georgia will agree, but kind of like the year that art school kind of got serious, kind of, where we were like actually taking ourselves like a little more like putting higher standards for ourselves. And I feel like I was at a point where I just wanted to explore new concepts that like meant something to me, but I was also very confused. That was when I was diving into the self-care industry a little bit more, which in hindsight is something that like very much I feel like I needed to do at that time. But I feel like my brain was just like this muddled mess where I just didn't really know what I was exploring, but I knew there was something there that I was trying to grasp at. And so I was talking to Kelly Richardson, who we all know and love. And she kind of just like pieced everything together for me. She was like, yeah, like, see, it's all connected. Like you're interested in this idea of like happiness and this idea of like the self-care industry and kind of like the commercialization of happiness, and which is something that I was interested in at the time. So that was kind of like a big aha moment where I was like, oh yeah, like I know what I'm doing, kind of. And then obviously that did like morph into something else. But like my second moment I would say was kind of, I don't know, I'm sure you guys will like maybe definitely be able to relate to this, but kind of when like an idea just kind of like jolts you, which like doesn't happen that often, but it's great when it does. But that was for the video that I made, Align Your Chakras. And I was just like sitting in my gender studies class. I was like kind of zoned out. And I like just had this idea of like this video. And it was such a simple concept, but it was something that like I was so excited about. Like immediately I was like, okay, like this is perfect. Like this is exactly what I've been feeling in my body, and like I haven't been able to like express in a way. So that was a big aha moment, I would say. And then at that, I think that video was really important too.
That did you make that in 2018 or 19, and then that was the first kind of like piece that was exploring those themes, and that was like kind of like the launch pad for the other works that you did, or is that right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I made that video in 2019. Kind of like before my trip to India.
Right.
And that was like the first video, because that was after I was like kind of moving away from the Waste series, which was like a series of like the bathtub photos that I took that were kind of like exploring self-care industry vibes. But I think what I was really trying to get at was like, oh, like what I'm actually interested in is the commercialization and appropriation of Hinduism within that industry. And so that video was just like, really important in that sense.
Totally. I was wondering, do you think, I mean, obviously everyone who's watching this needs to go and check out Rudra's website and Instagram, which we will link in the bio and everything. But would you be able to just really quickly describe what that video was for anyone who maybe hasn't seen it?
Yeah, so it's like a really simple premise. It's a white background. It's kind of like two channels, I would say. Georgia is on one side actually, and I'm on the other side. And it's like just a white background where I'm dressed in a white traditional dress, and I'm just standing in the middle. And then there's a bunch of people dressed in black, kind of just walking in front of me, like walking around me, trying to like kind of looking at me, but like not really taking the time to like stop and look at me, just kind of like, quick glances. And then on the other side, Georgia is dressed in like yoga, like I don't know, yoga attire, like leggings and like a sports bra or something, and she's doing like the sun salutation in just a very like slow, like intentional, kind of mildly seductive way. And yeah, that's pretty much the video. Oh, and the sound as well is kind of just like a distorted audio channel of like someone chanting Om. But it's like almost like a little ominous, I find. It kind of makes you feel quite unsettled, I would hope, as the viewer watches it.
Yeah, I found like that work was so like you say simple, but like maybe like visually, like how you put it together, but there was so much there to unpack and to think about and talk about. Like I feel like this was such an like excellent springboard into like so much like research and discourse around your practice. There was the other work that comes to mind was Get Your Ohm On, which was another like just fantastic work that you did. And so I feel like I was going to ask you like what drove you to make these works, and I feel like you kind of talked about how you got there, like what your process is, but what like internally was like going on for you that you were like so compelled to like, I need to make this work right now?
A lot of it was actually, I think the moment that it first really really made me angry and upset was when I was watching it was like this Vice documentary. And it was like of this girl, I don't know, she was like in some sort of like some like hippie festival in like, I don't know, Brazil or something. I honestly kind of forget. But there were points where there was just like little shots and clips of like, I don't know, like the like a Ganesh, like a big like Ganesh statue or something, and like people like doing like these like dances and like chants, but they were like all white, and like all like there was like no representation of anyone that would have belonged to that culture or anything. And it was just like the way that the video, like the girl herself, like her attitude was very like, this is weird, but like I'm gonna go along with it. Like it was very like, it was just so problematic in so many ways. And it just made me like so upset where like I actually just started crying. I was like, this is so ridiculous. And so that was probably the first moment that I was like, really felt that anger, I think. And then after that, I just kind of noticed it in every formation of my life, like or every aspect of it, like especially I'm sure Georgia, like living in Victoria is like definitely like it's filled with like little tidbits of appropriation, of just this like vibe of island life. But that island life often includes like yoga and like just om like symbols everywhere, like bracelets and like peace and love and like that that kind of thing. And like they're not nothing like there's no negative connotations at all, but it does feel strange as a person from that culture to be having like lived in the city for 5 years. I think it's been something that's just been on my mind for that long, and I've only just started to like digest it. But I guess to answer your question, yes, that was, I guess, just like once I realized, yes, once I realized that it was all around me, it was kind of like all I could think about,
So you mentioned that you like it made you feel angry. Like, would you say that that's like not a driving force, but like is that the way that you feel your response to seeing that, like was that anger what fueled the work, or was it more like kind of trying to unpack it?
I think with Om Chakras, it was definitely anger that was fueling the work. It was like a lot of like resentment. But I don't know, my life kind of like was taking a really good train trajectory at that point, because I like made that video and then I went to India for the first time in like 10 years to like visit my family. And that was just like something like the timing just could not have been better, I guess, for me, because I went to India and I kind of like just realized like a lot of people in India like don't really care about appropriation or anything like that, because it's obviously like a different identity that they associate with. It's like different being an Indian person living in India versus an Indian person living in Victoria, or like you have different experiences. But I guess going to India really helped because it helped me like obviously get in touch with my own culture again. and then also just kind of calmed me down a little bit, where I kind of just, was starting to see things like, not that it was irrational before, but kind of just being more open-minded and just being more understanding and coming at it from like a more compassionate way, where I wasn't just like, upset with anyone that like did yoga or something. It is like, it's been like a constant like learning curve where I'm just kind of changing my ideas or like my thoughts around it.
Yeah, I think that's like the most interesting part for me, like to understand about your work is kind of like, I guess like the like driving force behind it, because the imagery that you create is so like powerful. And I just think it's just really nice to hear you actually like explain sort of the journey you have been on like creatively. So I also want to ask you about, like, in respect to that, like the kind of context of like the research, like when you first started kind of making work about this, like was there any struggles, or like what kind of were you faced with when you began to do the research or like kind of look into the issues more?
Yeah. Struggles as in like just like during like finding like information, or kind of just like
No,
backlash that I received,
like
or like
anything. Yeah, like anything, I guess. Just like anything that you kind of like that you came across that kind of negatively impacted your like contextualization.
yeah, totally. I think something that comes to mind is definitely just like trying to communicate my feelings and thoughts around the issue, because it was just so hard to like, express what I was feeling without people like wanting, like expecting an answer, as in like, I'm asking these questions like, about yoga specifically, and and people are always like, well, what do you want from this? Like, what would be the ideal situation for you? Like, what is the ideal solution? Like, can white people not do yoga? Like that kind of thing, where the people just like wouldn't really get that it wasn't really about, I don't know, I guess it wasn't really about them. It was kind of more so about like what, kind of just like how I was feeling around the topic, so it just kind of led to like some uncomfortable situations, like even just within people I know, where they just like wouldn't really, where I guess they would feel attacked in some way, but that wasn't my intention.
But
My intention, I think, was to bring, or maybe it was my intention, I don't know.
I was gonna say, like, that's something that, like, even if it wasn't your intention, like, art is obviously all about like evoking a reaction and like making somebody like think about like, oh wait, I'm a white person and I like yoga, like is what is this telling me, or how am I supposed to feel? Like even that response, like
Yeah,
plainly, like you've done your job as an artist and you've like made somebody think about something. And I'm saying somebody, I mean me, like I've never like considered like the practice of yoga as like something that I should like know the background of, or like should take the time to actually like understand the context of like what I'm doing. So like I just think that is like that's what art is all about. And I think that like just, even if you did get backlash or whatever, like you said, it's your response. Like it's not for anyone else. It's not for anyone to feel like this makes me sound like a bad white person. Like if you feel like that, that's fine. That's like it's doing its job as art to like evoke a reaction. So I really love that. I love your answer to that.
thank you. Yeah, I love hearing that my work made an effect on you. Like that's really nice to like, very surreal, but yeah, totally, like it is something that, that I do want to come from, like from a more like with like a more compassionate response, I guess, now, just because I have felt that like fire fuel me. But now, like, I don't want to like hate on anyone that does it. I think it's just also just like bringing awareness to this idea that like, because yoga has just become so commercialized. Like it is something that's just like part of like, you go anywhere. Like I was like walking past the YMCA the other day and it was like yoga, Pilates, bar, come on in, like, and just like it's just become something that's so like intertwined with fitness, and it's just like it's just like changed courses of like exactly like where it was supposed, or where it came from, and no one really knows that. And that's just like all I'm trying to do, you know, it's just kind of bring it back to like a middle ground.
Yeah, just like bringing an awareness to it and starting a dialogue. Like you're not here to provide like the answers, because I know like being in the class with you and being in the critiques with you and like hearing everyone be like, okay, so now what? Like what do we do from here? And you're like, I don't know if I can figure it out. That's on you. Like that your response is your responsibility. Like I will not take any responsibility for like your white people feelings. Like as so I think, yeah, I completely agree with Shay that like your art was like it was so successful in just starting a conversation and like for you to like navigate these feelings. I also want to talk to you about some of like the other like ideas that you explore in your work. Um, I so like going back to Get Your Ohm On, which was about a window, or is taken through a window, and windows are a very reoccurring motif in your practice, and I would love to like hear you talk about like why windows and what do those mean for you.
Fair enough. I just love windows. It's just, oh my God, I just can't. A good window is just like, well, aesthetically, obviously, just incredible. But more so, I think windows for me with Get Your Own On, it was also kind of like a fun, it was like, yeah, really interesting because it was in my head for so long because the photo was taken in the house that I used to live in. But it was like in the backyard. And I remember I would be like walking home, you'd like enter through the backyard and like you could literally see just like into our house, like the lights were like, you know, you could like see what everyone was doing pretty much. And I thought that was like so fascinating. I'm also like I love Gregory Crutzen, as I'm sure you know, Georgia, and I don't know if you know him, Shay, but like yeah, like just great utilization of windows that he does. So I think that's also like a big influence for me. But yeah, with Get Your Own On, it kind of just came from that idea of like, yeah, walking past my house every night when I was coming home. And the image just kind of came to my head where I just wanted to like have that concept of me looking outside, but also like others being able to see me. And it kind of turned into like this like weird voyeuristic idea of myself, where it was kind of like it was like I often feel like an outsider looking inwards, or you know, an outsider kind of like in the sense of like, yeah, being in Victoria, not being surrounded by many other people of color, like kind of dealing with this concept or like these feelings on my own. But like, yeah, I'm looking inside myself right now. It's so cheesy to like, you know, figure that out. But it also like goes both ways, you know, where it's like, yeah, like people going back to like the critique and stuff where everyone's like, yeah, like, so what do you want from this? Or like, you know, like it's just a lot of like people looking at me. Maybe that's all it is about. And me looking at myself, you know, I don't know. I feel like Get Your Own On is just kind of like an intricate kind of way to like just express that of like this like of like voyeurism on someone looking at me as a person of color versus me looking at myself as a person of color, I guess, and also just as a person, obviously, you know. So if that makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like that is so like that comes through in your work. Like it obviously, like you can tell that it's like the windows are like compositionally planned, and like it like you know that that's like a motive, but like to hear you kind of like dissect that is like I really love that. And I also like just as a general theme like that I love to like look at is voyeurism and just in general, like whether it's like through film or photography or whatever. So I was wondering if you could like elaborate like a little bit more about like the voyeurism and like whether that kind of relates to your exploration of Hinduism at all.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say, I think, yeah, about that is that, yeah, there's so many like voyeuristic attitudes towards Hinduism, you know, in terms of just like, yeah, going to yoga classes, like going to like the studio to like meditate and like that kind of thing. And that I feel like maybe it's just like this, like, that's like my way of like seeing the culture from like what I guess like someone who doesn't identify with that culture, like how they would see it, you know? Just because for me, it's like become a part of like me growing up. Not, I wouldn't say I'm like religious in that aspect, but it's something that is like a huge part of my life, I think. So it's just maybe another way to like have a different perspective on it, maybe.
Yeah, I feel from like a viewer's point of view, like, so voyeurism is obviously quite like one dimensional in that you like, whether it's like a Hitchcock shot where you're just like kind of panning very very slowly like into inward to something, like usually there's an element of like you don't see everything in voyeurism, but you kind of see enough. It's almost like, well, if I practice yoga and like, and if I kind of condition myself to be like, oh, I understand this like on a surface level and that's good enough for me, then it's like the parallel is there, is that it's like not everything, you know, and like there's like an element of like hidden while also being like super exposed and super like commodified and commercialized. So that's my interpretation. Not that anyone asked, but like that's, yeah, I wonder if that's like, is that like,
I feel like you phrased that exactly how I wanted to phrase it, but don't know how to phrase it. You know, like I feel like that's such a good way to like put it. Yeah. Very much agree. Yeah.
cool. I was just gonna check if that was actually like an intention or
No, it is an intention now because you have me realization.
I feel like this is like what I miss most about like being in the studio, is just like kind of like saying, you're like, okay, this is kind of what I'm thinking, and then having people to like bounce those ideas off of, and then you're like, oh, okay, like that makes sense now that we're all trying to connect the dots here. And so yeah, I feel like we're already, I want to like start wrapping up because I'm worried about our timing here, even though there's just so many things that I still want to ask you. um I was wondering, like, how does your stance on the self-care industry and on yoga and everything, like how has that changed since you started doing that work? I feel like you kind of touched on it earlier, but if you wanted to like say kind of where you're at now.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said earlier, yeah, like I was very angry. And then we kind of moved on from those feelings, and I'm kind of just at a point where it's just something that like I'm just so fascinated by now. Like I'm just so intrigued. Like I could literally research like for forever into like just like, you know, like people that like, yeah, like I find myself like just finding like websites of like clothes even, you know, that are like appropriated, but like they're like marketed under like hippie clothing and like that kind of thing. Like it's just like this, yeah, this like weird world that exists. And now I'm just like, yeah, like finding other people that also feel the same way. And like, you know, like it's definitely turned more into something that I've accepted and something that like I'm just like intrigued by now and like would like to make, and it really does drive my art practice in a way that like I'm really happy with. So I'm glad that we're having these conversations because it's like I feel like it is kind of slowly starting to like build momentum and just like some other ways too that maybe it's just because I've started following other people on Instagram that like believe like, you know, that like are researchers and stuff like that. So like in my own world, it is kind of like starting to feel better.
I really like that your kind of your like outlook shifted, but I also feel like you're allowed to be angry. Like there's like I would never want like an artist to sort of like have had some sort of like response and then just kind of like go, oh shit, like my outward projection wasn't received well, so I need to like shift the way that I like approach these subjects to like something that's more palatable. I think that like, not that you are doing that, but like definitely just I would hate for like that to be like the only reason. Like obviously it's tiring to be angry all the time, so like I'm glad that you're like at like a more sort of like explorational part of it, but like the anger like can still surface, and you should just be like, well, fuck you to anyone who like who questions it or who tells you that you like shouldn't be angry, you know.
For sure, yeah. And I guess, yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. And I feel like it's at a good point now where I know I phrased it like, oh, like I'm totally over the anger, but it definitely like does drive me when I'm like having like I still like, it's like a good fire to have in the
Yeah.
sense where like you have like another idea that I just like would love to like, but like that idea kind of like comes from like just feeling these like intense feelings sometimes. So it is like a good way to get the work out and to like make the work.
What are you working on just now? Just out of curiosity, are you working on anything just now?
Totally. I'm working on this painting back here. I can kind of show you, but it's like literally haven't worked on it in 6 months or like in a long time. So I haven't really worked on it. But yeah, I have an idea for another version of Get Your Own On, which has been in my brain for a long time. So I'm really excited about that.
That's so exciting. That's so exciting.
I know, yeah, it's just like, yeah, just COVID is kind of just putting some hindrances to it. So once like, yeah, I don't know, that gets better, I think I'm gonna make that photo for sure. And yeah, I kind of just finished up some like other smaller projects, just like little commissions. So now I'm kind of excited to like have the space to work on that guy over there. So yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Is there anything you wanted to say about like how your practice has changed since the pandemic, or like any thoughts you have on that?
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like obviously like the pandemic has affected everyone. For me, it was kind of like a good effect just because I was in Calgary like with my family for most of the summer when I wasn't really like doing anything, and I like set up like a studio in the garage, so I was just like painting like all the time and it was so fun. But I think that was like a really good significant shift in my practice just because it was like I was able to like paint every day, but without having just graduated and like not having like you or, any profs or like any friends around to like bounce ideas off of. It was like kind of a definitely like weird shift to transition from. But I think it was really important because I think some of the work that I made, like I was like, I'm proud of for the fact that I just like pushed through it on my own because I didn't really have anyone else there. It was kind of like my own like inner thoughts telling me what to do. So it's definitely changed in that sense. Obviously, things like the state of the world does affect some things. So that I think that like, yeah, it did affect my work a little bit, but
yeah. Do you have any just last words, any piece of advice, anything that you like want to tell people now that you have this opportunity?
um, hmm. I would say this is something that I need to work on. So this is like a piece of advice that I tell myself. But don't second guess yourself. I mean, obviously second guess yourself, like, to an extent. But there is like a fine line between just like a nice balance of like trusting yourself and trusting your gut and not like, I think for me, like I've often relied on like other people to be like, hey, is this a good idea? Like, like where I need like that validation. But yeah, just make the work and it doesn't have to be good, and like you don't need to even know what it means until afterwards. So
I love that. That should be like every artist mantra, like just fucking make work.
just make it, yeah.
Just get it out there, get it out into the world.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rudra, for joining us. We're like so happy that we got to chat with you. I feel like we've learned so much about you and your practice. And you're just like the most fantastic guest. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy that we could like, this is like so helpful for me too, just to like chat about my own work and just have people to talk about it with. It was just really nice.
I'm so glad. No, honestly, it's been like an absolute pleasure to have you and to learn a bit more about the workings of you.
Well, yeah, I love what you guys are doing. I think it's amazing. So thank you for having me to be part of it.